In New South Wales, the attention all on the state budget delivered. Here are the headline figures. The budget is in surplus, although the surplus for this financial year has come down from what was forecast pre-election. As you can see, though, it gradually increases over the coming financial years, averaging $1.7 billion over those four-year forward estimates. The story on the debt front, as you can see here, shows a net negative debt situation now, but then going further into debt in raw numbers, in fact, a record level of debt. This is largely because of a very big infrastructure spend, a record infrastructure spend that the New South Wales coalition government has embarked on. It's also boasting a record spend on education and health as well. And with me now is the New South Wales Treasurer, Dominic Perrottet. Treasurer, thanks very much for your time this afternoon. Look, let's go to the debt situation here. That net debt of $38.6 billion in 22-23, a record debt level. Can you explain it? Why is it deteriorating so sharply?
Well, look, David, we believe the debt position in that outer year is certainly manageable and affordable. We have a negative net debt position today at $8.8 billion. And that will grow over time as our infrastructure investment rolls out. We're building $93 billion of infrastructure over the next 4 years. That is a record. But importantly, if you look at the debt position compared to other states, even in that final year, we have the lowest debt of any mainland states. When it comes to as a percentage of GSP, about 5%. That's half the debt of the other states and double the infrastructure. So we believe that states' finances are in a very strong position right now, and that's come through the numbers today.
Would you be prepared to look at further asset sales, though, if necessary?
Look, we haven't any plans, David, at this stage. There's no doubt that our asset recycling approach, some of those privatisations have turbocharged infrastructure investment in this state. But one of the initiatives we had in last year's budget was the establishment of a future fund, a generations fund, that nets off our debt position. And that currently has a balance of around $10 billion. That will grow to around $16 billion over the next 4 years. And that fund has the capacity to retire debt if we need it. But the returns on that fund have been around 8.5%. If you look at the cost of debt at the moment, around 2%. We don't believe that we will need to retire any debt at this stage, but obviously we'll monitor the situation and make sure that as we roll this infrastructure out, we do it in a sustainable and affordable way.
The housing downturn has hit your stamp duty revenues, but you seem to be suggesting in the budget that that's going to turn around. Things have bottomed out and it will improve over the coming 4 years. How confident are you, how certain are you that the housing market has hit the bottom and will now start to rise again?
Well, David, you're right. We've written down over $10.5 billion in stamp duty receipts over the last 2 years. But look, property prices have come off around 14% since a high in 2017. Treasury forecasts have that over the next 12 months, the property market will bottom up and then we will start to move back to trend. We're already seeing transaction volumes increase. The auction rates, I guess, following the federal election, sure, it's early days, back above the 60, heading towards the 70% mark. But obviously
that's what I was going to say. Sorry to jump in. But it is early days. Yes, a bit better news in the last couple of weeks. But is that enough to really bank on improving property prices, improving stamp duty revenues?
Well, a lot of these forecasts we had in place prior to the federal election, I think there was obviously uncertainty at that time, and I call this the coalition confidence, having a re-elected federal government running on a platform of lower taxes. We've seen the Reserve Bank cut interest rates, and hopefully we'll see that translate into an improvement in the property market. But we will be monitoring it very carefully. But our history here in New South Wales is to be very conservative with our forecasts. Now, yes, I say that off the back of significant write-downs in property transfer. But if you look at the last 6 years, we've generally been surprised on the upside than the downside. And I'd prefer Treasury to be more conservative with their estimates than otherwise not.
Let's talk about the GST. Now, your GST revenues, you forecast them to fall by $2.3 billion. Why is that?
Well, that just happened in one hit, David. In the last federal budget, we had to write down $2.3 billion to 2022, and if you go out the other year, it goes to about $3.2 billion. And obviously that's as a result of a reduction in the pool with slowing consumption across the country. What we've always argued for in New South Wales is that states that reform should not be penalised when it comes to GST distribution. So one of the issues that we raised with the federal government last year with a change that was brought in to put a relativity floor at 70 cents for Western Australia, we argued against that because we saw Western Australia as a state that squandered the mining boom, and why should it be for states like Victoria and New South Wales to pick up the tab for other states? But as a result of our negotiations with the Commonwealth, we did lock in a no worse off clause that ensures that New South Wales will not be penalised as a result of that change. And already we're seeing...
But have you got, under the deal you negotiated there, have you got is New South Wales getting a fair deal now on the GST?
Well, I don't believe we're getting a fair deal at all. I mean, if you go on a per capita basis, we'd be $10 billion better off over a 5-year period.
So what are you going to do about that? If you're not getting a fair deal, what are you going to do about that?
Well, the first thing we did, David, was make sure, as a result of that change, the federal government said to us, you won't be worse off. Well, we've already seen we would have been worse off. So we ensured, as I wrote to senators in New South Wales, that their loyalties are more to the people of New South Wales than they are to the Liberal Party. And through those senators, we were able to lock in a change in the legislation that enshrined in law that no state would be worse off. And we've already seen that, but for that change, New South Wales will be another $700 million worse off in 2022-23, and that means that the Commonwealth Government will have to top up payments to us in that year. Having said that, I don't believe that's enough. States who reform should not be penalised, but rather for better Commonwealth financial relations. When it comes to GST, there should be greater incentives in place for states that do reform to be rewarded. I look at a state like Queensland, its public service is growing at a much greater rate than its population. It doesn't make better use of its assets, and it's the taxpayers of our state in New South Wales who continue to subsidise states like Queensland.
Well, give us an example of that. Is there a reform you would think about, but you're not going to do because you'll be punished under the GST formula?
We'll take a whole range of the asset recycling initiatives that we have undertaken, and we're making better use of what we have. And then you look at a situation with the federal government on a per capita basis when it comes to infrastructure investment. New South Wales generally is I guess not supported by the Commonwealth compared to the other states. Now, I'm very proud of the fact that as a state government, as a state here in New South Wales, we're happy to stand on our own 2 feet, but that shouldn't be taken advantage of. We had the federal Labor opposition at the last election promised $3 billion in federal funding for Metro West, a major state-building project here. We'll be asking the federal government for that same infrastructure investment. What I would like to see is a change, and today I announced a review here in New South Wales of federal financial relations, that we should be driving reform from the bottom up. And I think that's going to be great, not just for the states, but for our country. And we should have a system in place that incentivises states to reform, not penalises them.
Well, I wanted to ask you about this because I remember Tony Abbott tried the Federation White Paper approach, didn't really go anywhere. Are you going to get cooperation from the federal government to actually review federal-state financial relations properly?
Well, I'd like to think so. I've already spoken to Josh Frydenberg about this, and we'll be catching up shortly. I recently led a review where we set up a board of state treasurers to work together. And I think the Commonwealth was too happy at the time, but it has led to some significant benefits for each of the states, Labor and Liberal states and territories working together to get better outcomes from the federal government. I believe our country will be stronger with a much greater focus on bottom-up federation. We can't just simply sit here and wait for bureaucrats in Canberra to make decisions about what's in the best interest of our state. We have an obligation ourselves to be engaged in that process. So this review will look at opportunities to simplify and improve the federal financial relations that are in place. And then once those recommendations are provided to government, I'll be certainly, through the Board of State Treasurers, sitting down with Josh Frydenberg and our federal counterparts to try and get some change in that space.